Hi everyone and welcome to another live video in this channel. For the ones that don't know about me, my name is Antonio Leiva and I'm a freelance Android trainer and help other Android developers to boost their careers by using different methods with different products and services. And today I'm doing a little different live video from the ones I do every week. As you may know already, I decided to do one weekly video telling you about some of my experiences, my approaches to different things, my ideas. So today the video is a little bit different because I usually do them live on Facebook, but today I decided to use YouTube to see how it works, and it's also different because of the topic. Today, I want to talk about my experience by publishing my book, Kotlin for Android Developers. This is a book that I decided to write around uh, 4 years ago, more or less, when the language, when Kotlin was still a preview. It wasn't still a final version, and of course, Google hadn't still decided to use it as another official language to develop Android apps. So what I want to do in this video is to uh, very informally tell you about my experience writing it, deciding the topic, publishing it, and all the alternatives that I could have done that I didn't take, and why. So that's basically it. I'll also take a look at the chat and all the questions that I received previously to this video to solve them all so that we can have a broader idea of one of the many ways to publish a tech book that we have nowadays. Gladly, nowadays, it's really easy to do it because we have a lot of tools and a lot of platforms that allow us to do it without many issues. So it's not like so many years ago that you would have to use a publisher to do it. Today, there are so many tools that it's really easy for anyone to start with it and to publish a book. So to start with, from the beginning, how I did have this idea of writing my book, Kotlin for Android Developers. Let's remind that at that point, Kotlin wasn't a finished language. It was, of course, not used still in hardly any Android companies or people that were developing Android apps. So the idea, the conception came at the beginning of 2015, where I was in an event in Cadiz. Well, it was called Material Fest, and we were talking. I was there to talk about material design, and there were many different talks about different topics. And one of them that was done, but in fact it was done by the organizers of the event, 47 Degrees. They did a talk that was about developing Android apps using Scala. At that point, I had also read a document that Jake Wharton released about how Kotlin could help developing Android apps and why he thought it was a good language to start developing Android apps. So the combination of the ideas I took from this article and also the talk that these guys and friends did was the seed that started this adventure. I At the beginning of that talk, I just couldn't stop thinking about doing the same but with Kotlin and how it could be done if it was possible using a different language to develop Android apps. That was so exotic that I couldn't stop thinking about it and how I could do it. So that same night when I reached the hotel, I just instead of sleeping, that's what I should have done. I started reading the Kotlin reference and trying the few little things, and I was cultivated from the very beginning. I just fell in love with the language because it was uh, so productive and so powerful when compared to Java that I simply couldn't stop learning, and and discovering how to apply this new language to the Android development. So a few months later, I think that 1 or 2 months later, I started writing articles on my blog about it, and I thought, why not, instead of doing what I always had done, that was showing my knowledge in my blog, why not writing a book about it? At that point, obviously, there were no books related to Kotlin, and of course, none of Kotlin for Android. So I decided to try it. I thought, how could I do it so that it's easy for me to write a book, but also to discover whether people would be interested or not on that topic. So what I did was the first decision I had to make is how to write this book. What were the tools that I would choose to write the book and to make it as easy as possible. So the first thing that came to my mind, I had heard about a platform called Limpub, which is a place where you can self-publish your books, but it's a little more than that, because they provide you with several different tools that help you a lot in the process. In the case of Limpad, what you can do is to write your book in Markdown, and then thanks to their tools, they render this Markdown into a readable book, and you don't have to do anything else. They have some customizations about the fonts, the size of the font, some things about the look and feel of your book, but in the end, they do all the hard work of book edition for you. So it was really easy for me to just focus on the content and forget about the content, the aspect of the book. So when I saw this, I was just convinced from the very beginning, because apart from that, at that point, Limpub was completely free. Nowadays, I think you have to pay a monthly fee or a one-time fee per book or something like that. I'm not very sure how it works nowadays. But at that point, it was completely free, so it was really easy to me to start using it. And after I had decided that, I needed to decide how I was going to organize the content of that book. So what I didn't want is to have to think about the book a lot beforehand, because otherwise I wouldn't have time to do all the book scripting and then write it very carefully. So what I decided to do, and in the end turned out to work very well, is to start creating an Android app from scratch, doing it on my own at home. And when I was at the same moment that I was developing that app, all the concepts that I were learning, I would put them on the book. At the beginning, of course, the book was pretty raw, but iteration by iteration, it has become a much more professional, let's say it in a way, book. And that was it. I didn't have a very strict script. I just started creating an app, and in the process explaining the concepts from the simplest one to the more complex ones. And that's the way that the book keep progressing. But before continuing to write the book, first I had to do some investigation to discover whether other Android developers would be interested on it or not. And this point is very important, because it will also answer one of the questions I had. What I did to find out whether the people were interested or not, what I did is to publish the book when I only had like 50% of it or something like that. Limpub lets you do that, publish a book that is not finished and start selling it. And that way you can discover whether people is eager to buy it or not. So I publish it at a very low price. And I think that in the very few first days, I had like 100 sales or something like that. So that first showed that the book had some potential, that I could write about it and people would be interested. But on the other hand, it helped me keep motivated to write the book, because one of the things that I find very frustrating and very difficult about writing a book is that you have to be working for, I don't know, 3 6 months without having any, not only revenue, but also without having any feedback from other developers of whether you are doing a good or bad job about it. So now that I had released the book and I had like 100 readers, I had like a compromise with them. I needed to finish the book, because otherwise I would be failing those people that had relied on me. So that's one of the questions that came from from Santi from Instagram. He asked me from there how to keep motivation. I think that you need a very big reason to keep motivated, because otherwise you end up not doing it. It's a really hard work, a really hard task that requires a lot of involvement and a lot of time. So you really need something that pushes you to do it, and that was my fuel, knowing that there were people waiting for this book to be finished. And now that I had this, I had some readers and the idea, and I was progressing with it. How I planned and how I organized myself to do it. First time, I must say that at that point I think that I was already working from home. So on my situation was probably easier than some other people that may have to commute to go to their work, because what I did is to use the first hours of the day from 7 to 9 or something like that to write the book every day. I woke up soon to have a couple of hours before start working to write the book. It took me around, I started writing it on March or April or something like that, and the first version was finished. I think that it was September or so. Obviously, I didn't do it every single day. I had some time. The holidays were in the mid, and some things like that. So it probably took me like 5 months or so to finish the whole book and release the 100% finished version. At that point, of course, I also raised the price. This very low price only was available for the people that relied on me on the project from the very beginning. And from that point, I started updating the book from time to time. I reviewed the book with all the feedback that I got from the readers, and I was updating the book and releasing it pretty often, so that it could meet some a very good quality, because I didn't have any kind of reviewing process. It was all very natural and very evolving. And it was also thanks to this kind of platform that allows you to release versions of the book pretty often. Another questions that I had is how to sell this book on your own. This is a very important question, and for instance, as I released it on GitHub, on Limpaf, the book was sold from the very beginning through that platform. So at the beginning, I only sold it there. But as the time evolved, I decided to try other platforms. The first one was my own blog, as I have quite some visits thanks to the articles that I've been writing for the latest 6 years or so. It was a good place to sell the book, because Limpaf, apart from leaving you publishing for free, at least at my when I started, It's not the same nowadays, but in exchange, they keep some of the revenue from that book. It's true that it's very little when compared to other platforms, but in any case, as I had that opportunity, I decided to publish it also on my blog. So when people could come to read my articles, could also know about the book, and if they were interested, they could get it from there. This was the situation until Kotlin released their beta version. That it was at October or November 2015, I think. And obviously, when the beta was released, there was a huge rise in the sales because it was the first book that was released related to the topic. I don't know if Kotlin in Action was already announced or not, but in any case, that book was not released, only announced. So mine was the only reference at that point to learn Kotlin, and in particular to Android development. When the beta was released, there was, as I mentioned, there was a high peak in sales, but it was not the only moment. There was another important moment that was in March or in February 2016. But that is when Kotlin released the 1.0 version, the first stable version, and I took that opportunity to have that book, to have the book updated to the 1.0 version at the very beginning, from the very beginning, so that it could be a good tool for people interested in learning the language now that it was stable and it was released. So now we could realize that it was a real new programming language, and not something that could disappear in one time or another. At that point, I also decided to publish it in paperback edition. Limpath only allows you to publish it on digital edition. So I had to look for another solution for that. What I decided is to go to use one of the most used platforms in the world to do this, which at that point was called CreateSpace. CreateSpace is a company that Amazon bought to allow independent publishers to publish their books and sell them through Amazon. Nowadays, that platform doesn't exist anymore, but it's integrated into the Kindle Direct Publishing platform, which is the one that you use to both publish. Nowadays, you can use it to publish the ebook and also the paperback edition. So I took that choice because it was really easy. I had my book on Limpath for the digital edition, and it was very easy because Limpath allows you to export the book to let it print ready, to leave it print ready to use it to print it on a real book. So with that export, I just needed to import it into Amazon and use a complete cover, of course, because at that point I only had the front cover and I needed the back cover too. So at that point I decided first to look for a more professional cover, and second to use it also to publish the paperback edition. That cover was designed by Luis Herrero. That was a colleague of mine at Plex at that point, and he did it for free. He'll always regret of that, but I'm really happy with the result because it was really nice and very different from the kind of covers that we were used in technical books. So I got really excited about it, and I was so interested, so eager to see it in printed in paper that I decided to do it with the first official release of the language, and that's what I did. From that point, I used Amazon to do the paperback edition. Sometime later, I also added the digital edition to Amazon. I must confess that selling digital editions, selling ebooks in Amazon is really unprofitable. Is you are only getting 30% of the books. If the book is over $10 or €10, you only get 30% of the benefits. So what they want to try is that ebooks are always below $10, and that way you get the 70%. But obviously, on a technical book, that's not a normal price. So I had to go through the rules, abide the rules, and publish it by only getting the 30% of the book. That when you compare it to the 85% that you get from Limpath, obviously the comparison is disproportionate. But anyway, I wanted to reach to more people and give people that are used to Amazon to the opportunity to get the book. So I finally ended up adding it as another option for selling the book. And that's mostly it. That was my progression from having this idea, this conception, to getting the book published and sold out everywhere. The other important part of this process is the marketing, and here I'm afraid that I don't have a good set of tools that I can provide you. I was very lucky because from the very beginning the Kotlin team and the JetBrains team was very supportive with me and added the book to their Kotlin reference. So from there, I got a lot of visits to my book, and I can guess that a lot of sales. Apart from that, I already had a blog that was working pretty well, and I had quite some visits, so that also helped without having to do a lot more efforts. But apart from that, I haven't done much else. I've tried some other options like Facebook ads or things like that, but I didn't see that it's a very powerful tool just for a book. Maybe for other products it can be more powerful, but for the book itself, I didn't find it extremely powerful. So the only advice that I can give, because it's what worked for me, is that you must become visible to the audience that you are targeting by writing articles, by going to events, by giving talks, and these kind of things that will show you and will give you the opportunity to show your book to other people. Apart from that, I guess you can rely on SEO tools, like if you are writing a book that is very specific and there are no other important books covering that place, then it's easier for you to appear in Google search, and also if they look for it for this kind of topics on Amazon or things like that. But apart from that, my recommendation is that if you want to sell something on your own, you need to become visible and to put yourself in front of your audience in any way. This is another option, doing videos on YouTube or on other platforms, so that people can find you in very different ways. The other big question, and that And that's one of the questions that Jorge Castillo had, because they asked me for several different questions. One was focusing why I decided to self-publish instead of using a publisher. Well, at the beginning, I didn't even think about it. I didn't want to spend time on looking for someone that would publish it for me. So I decided to do all on my own. This was the first reason, and the second reason is that, as I imagine, and I have verified it later, if you write a book and you want to get some profit for it, you have to do it on your own, because otherwise, if you do it through a publisher, I guess you need to sell millions of copies if you want to get some kind of remarkable revenue. Otherwise, it will be like a very few amount of money that wouldn't be any difference in your day-to-day life. So these were my two reasons. This book was also like a try to find out if I could do some revenue in some different ways apart from my regular job, and I wanted to know how easy or difficult could be to do these kind of things, and that's why I decided to self-publish. If you go through a publisher, it can be also a very good tool. First, because the book will be probably more polished, though I've heard that it's not the case either in most of the situations. But um, it's also very, very helpful if you don't have still an audience. They will do all the marketing for you. So you could probably reach more people that way than doing it on your own. And if what you are looking with that book is to get some visibility instead of some revenue, then it can be a very interesting way of doing it too. But if you are looking for some revenue or even a way of living, this is not possible in general by going through a publisher. You may know that even writers of regular books have a very hard time to live out of their books. So imagine with technical books where our niche is much much smaller than when you are writing a book that anyone can read. So my recommendation is that if you are writing that book just for visibility or for reputation, using a publisher may be a good option. But if you are also thinking about getting some revenue, it's much better to do self-publishing. Of course, it's much harder too, because you have to take care of the whole process instead of just writing the book, and get guidance on how you can make it more professional, and how you can sell it. All that is given for you. So apart from that, the other question that Jorge asked me was the complete pipeline, with which I also more or less explained. If I use Amazon, as I mentioned, I use it for the paperback edition, and not at the beginning, not for the digital edition, though nowadays I also sell it using the digital edition. But I also use Limpath, also my blog, and also another platform that I didn't mention, that is Draft2Digital. This platform, what it does is to publish the book into many different digital stores. For example, in the Apple Store or the Play Store. There are Kobo, many different app stores for different kind of ebook readers or different platforms. All that is done by Draft2Digital from the same. You just upload it once, and they do all the publishing for you. This is not working extremely well for me, but it's another tool. And as I wanted to try to be everywhere I could, I also use it. in the past. Nowadays, I have it a little stopped. And how percent do they take from the book's price? I kind of mentioned that already. If you sell it through your own platform, as I do in my blog, you have to use some payment platforms. I use Stripe and PayPal, and they get some revenue, which is a little percent when compared to other platforms, but it's still something, maybe 50 or 60 cents per sale. When you sell it through Amazon, the paperback edition, it doesn't make sense, but the paperback edition gets much more. You get much more revenue from it than from the digital edition. I think the paperback edition is they get the 30% plus what it plus the price of printing the book. But in the end, for instance, I'm selling the book in around $29, and or $32 nowadays, I think, and I get like $15 or so, more or less the 50% in the end. And the digital edition, you get only the 30% of the book from Amazon. And then on Limpath is 80% plus 50 cents or something like that. 85% is what you get. So they get 15% plus 50 cents or something like that. I don't remember exactly because I think they changed it a little, but more or less, you get much more revenue than when you do it through other platforms. And that's it, more or less, about the revenue. Of course, the best way is to sell it on your own site, but obviously that requires a lot more infrastructure, and you have to use other tools. For instance, I use Sendol to serve the book that give the buyer a link so that they can download it, and they also get the updates when I update the book. So it's a little bit more complex, but of course, if you have the time and also you have a platform that a lot of people visit, then it can be a very important way to do it. In fact, nowadays is where I get the most revenue from the book, usually. And then if you want to publish in paperback edition in paper, I completely suggest Amazon. It's so easy, and the revenue is not so bad for all the things that they are doing for you. They are selling it, they are sending it, they are printing it, so you get a lot for just more or less 50% of the price. And that's it, more or less. Of course, it's much more than what you would get from a publisher. From the publishers that have contacted me, you usually get like 1,000 or 2,000 euros from upfront, but that means that until you don't sell these 2,000 euros in profit, not in profit for them, but the revenue that you would get, they won't give you much. They won't give you more money. So you probably won't reach those 2,000 euros in any ways, because you have to sell a lot to get that, and that's what you will get from a publisher. So again, if you want to get some revenue, you need to self-publish. He also asked me why if I rejected third-party publisher or just went straight for self-publishing. I already answered that. And what would be my thoughts about that? Third parties seem to impose lots of constraints. Yeah, I mentioned already that you won't get much revenue from a regular publisher, and also they usually give you like the index of how your book must be done. You also, I think that you have some reviewers also that will say whether the book is good or not, and that may be very subjective. So you are tying to a lot of rules that obviously the publisher wants to have, because in the end they are putting the money up front to publish a book that they don't know if it's going to work or not. So I understand the part of the publishers; they have a lot of work to do, and the marketing part is the most difficult, and they are doing it for you. But on the other hand, I've heard the experience of people that have published through some of these publishers. I won't give names, of course, but they are not very happy with the result, because in the end, the the visibility is not so big, because these kind of publishers release a lot of books every month, even every day. So your book gets diluted into so many books. Then the quality is not so high, the reviewing quality. So the ending result of the book still depends a lot on you. And the benefits are little when compared to doing everything on your own. Of course, doing everything of your own requires a lot more work and it's more difficult. But on the other hand, you are doing your own successes and your own mistakes. So it's all you, and the good things and bad things end up with you. So in my opinion, I think it's more reconforting when you get a sale that has been done by you from scratch, and that you have followed the whole process of the book. So in my opinion, if I have had to do it, even if I wouldn't have any blog like mine that is popular or things like that, if nobody knew about me in the Android community, I would probably do still self-publishing, unless, of course, my only goal for the book is visibility. Then I could opt for a publisher like these ones. But in the end, it can be that if you don't have some little visibility, they don't give you the option anyway. So in the end, my opinion is that self-publishing is much better in our case, and will give you much more rewarding times than doing it through a publisher. And he also said that Jorge Castillo again, that he always understood that books don't suppose big income, mostly because of comments that he's seen on Twitter. Is the book an important part of your income, or you think about it more as a self-promotion thing? Well, in my case, is both things. I can show you, for instance, here. Let me share the screen. My revenues nowadays for the book are not huge. This is Limpa, where I mentioned above, and if we get in the author's page, my revenue, for instance, in March was about $400, which is obviously not enough to live out of it. But of course, it's an important entry point, and specifically, it's an important money that I can expect every month, because it's mostly the same. It keeps decreasing and decreasing, because obviously the momentum of Kotlin is decreasing, in the sense that most of the Android community already knows about it, and most of the Android community have already known about the book or already read the book. But in any case, it's an interesting part of my monthly profit, especially nowadays that I'm living out of my own project. This is the impact part, but for instance, from Amazon is more or less 400 euros too, or something like that, and maybe a little less from my blog. So maybe around 900 euros or something like that per month is something that I can get from this book, which is of course much higher than what you can get from a publisher. I'm not saying that this is something that will last forever. Of course, this is something that that will keep decreasing during during the lapse of time, because as I mentioned, our books have some momentum. But other thing that is important about self-publishing is that as you are publishing your own book, you have your own rules. And in my case, let me get back to stop sharing the screen. Okay. And in my case, as I was writing a book about a language that was so young and so new, I already knew that the language was going to change a lot especially during the first years. Nowadays, it's quite more stable, but at the beginning, the language was changing all the time, and new features were being released almost every month. So I knew that I had to update that book if I wanted to be up to date and to have a book that would be helpful for the community. So I couldn't have done if I had used a publisher. When you use a publisher, you publish your book, and the book, in general, I don't know if there are some platforms that do it differently, but in general, you publish your book and you forget about it. You cannot update it. My book has been updated probably more than 14 or 15 times. And this is important first for me because I can keep providing a book that is up to date, but also for the people that bought it, that they can also get updated and have a book that is helpful nowadays, even more than 3 years since they bought the book. So this is another important point to have in mind when you are publishing a book, that if you self-publish, you have the whole control of it. And how I solve the paperback problem, because you may be wondering that if people get the paperback book, they are stuck to that version. And of course, in the paperback edition, that's the case. But what I do is to give free access to the people that get the paperback edition, so that they can get at least the digital updates forever. And that's how I managed to have a book that you can think about it as a very static thing. I can have it updated and keep it up to date with the versions of the language. Nowadays, in fact, the book is updated up to 1.3 version, which is the latest version of Kotlin, and I couldn't do that if I had used another publisher. And that's it. I hope that it solves answers all your questions, Jorge. As you may see, if the book works, which is obviously not easy, I know that I'm very lucky that this book works so well, because I wrote it in the perfect moment. I was the first to be there, and thanks to that, obviously the book had a much more visibility that if I had published the book when there were other 4 or 5 similar books. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I could replicate the success of this book if I wrote another one. But in any case, if you are able to write a book that is interesting for the community you are targeting, I'm sure that it can be a good opportunity to get some profit from it. And the last question that I had is from me through Roy, who asked me how many hours on average I need to spend every day to write a book like Kotlin for Android developers. I mean, how many hours of writing and how many hours of researching. Well, this depends a whole lot in your. It depends on your um, the amount of knowledge that you have about the topic you are talking about, also the complexity of the book. My book was kind of easy to write because I explain the concept what I'm writing the app, so I didn't need to do a lot of thoughtful decisions beforehand. It was like some kind of uh, um, it was created in a very natural way instead of having to decide everything up front. But even with that, I had to do a lot of research because there was hardly any information at that point about how to write Android apps using Kotlin. Also, the language, even with the awesome reference that Kotlin has, uh, there was not so many people to talk about the topic and to find other ways to think about it. So I had like couple of months or three of research before starting writing the book, where I applied, where I started learning the language and applied them to the project that I have on GitHub that is called One Hood Kotlin. That's the place where I practice all that then I wanted to tell in the book. And then the book took me like from April or so to October, I think it was. So I like 6 months more or less with some stops for the holidays and all that. So 5 6 months more or less to of writing like a couple of hours per day. In general, it was only on weekdays, but I also used on weekends when I have some time or some spare times that I found during the weeks. So I cannot count exactly how much it took, but uh, for sure you will need to use like 6 months of continuous involvement in the writing of the book, even if it's only a couple of hours per day or 1 or 2 hours per day. But it's not an easy task. So in general, I recommend that if you haven't written anything before, you start by writing articles instead of writing a book, because it's a very deep task. And if you are not used to writing, it's going to be very difficult. And another problem that I had to overcome is that English is not my mother tongue. I'm Spanish and I've never lived abroad, so my English is far from perfect. So at the very beginning, my book was probably full of mistakes and very bad use of the language. But in the end, I think that it's something that is not so important to the reader. There are many readers that are not native either, and what they want is a book that helps them with their tasks rather than a perfect book that has a perfect use of the language and no mistakes at all. So that part that can seem like a problem about self-publishing, I think that it's in fact something that will help you go faster without worrying so much about the perfection of the book. And once you finish it, you always can polish. You can contract someone so that they review the book, or you can use some tools to help you. I used half and half. I had like 2 or 3 people that read the book and sent me feedback to polish the most important parts of the book. And then I also used Grammarly, that I'm sure that many of you know about it. But I used the paid version and reviewed the whole book to find all the grammatical mistakes and also the bad uses I was doing of the language. Grammarly is pretty powerful in that sense, especially the paid version, which has some extra features apart from just finding bad use of the words, also suggest some alternatives, some synonyms that can provide you a more rich use of the language, and also you can make it more formal, more informal. So I really recommend a tool like that if you are self-publishing your book too, and you are not native. Of course, if you are native, you don't have that problem. But in my case, it was a very big handicap that I overcame in that way. So that's the last question that I have. I hope that it has clarified many of your questions about how to self-publish a book, what tools do you have, and in any case, if you have any questions, you can use the comments below, and I'll be really happy to answer all the questions that I haven't answered in this video. Apart from that, if you want to keep being updated about the new live events I do, or the new videos that I publish, just subscribe to my channel. That I'll keep publishing one video per week, so that you can be updated with any of the questions or interests you may have. I'm always open to suggestions about the topics of these videos. For instance, I did that because I had many questions about how I have written my book, and what tools I use and all that. So if you have any questions about anything and you want me to do a new video about it, and related, or even how to um, build up your company around the idea of teaching, as I've done, anything like this, anything that you see that I've done previously and that my experience can help you in some way, please let me know, and I'll be really happy to do more videos about it. So again, thank you so much for listening. In the end, I already was like almost 1 hour, so I hope all this content is really helpful for you, and let's keep in contact. See you in the next one. Bye.